Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of BTTH Rebirth of Emperor Yang episode number 132 based on novel. So let's start. After finishing these, Xiao Yan slowly took back his eyes and scanned the whole sky for a week. This time, except for those strong fighting emperors, other people in the sky have consciously fallen into the city below. But they don't want to be watched by Xiao Yan. Even the 9-star and half emperor was easily killed by Xiao Yan. They don't think they can be stronger than the 9-star and half emperor. At this moment, I'm afraid that even if Xiao Yan has really been seriously injured, no one will dare to offend him easily. After all, didn't the group of people just listen to Sun Shuo's words and think that Xiao Yan really has no resistance at the moment, so they rushed up and wanted to kill Xiao Yan? However, I'm afraid Sun Shuo didn't think of the result. In the sky, the battle between Bai Ying and Sun Shuo also stopped again because of Xiao Yan. At the moment, both of them felt extremely shocked. Sun Shuo didn't expect that Xiao Yan, who was already at the end of the crossbow, could show such terrible power at such a moment, especially the emergence of the North King, a puppet at the level of 9 stars and a half emperors. This kind of super thug is enough for Xiao Yan to suppress anyone under the strong emperor. Now even if Xiao Yan is invincible under the emperor, this is also true. Even his back at this time was also very surprised. Looking back on the previous scene of saving people, Bai Ying couldn't help laughing at himself in the bottom of his heart. He thought that if he didn't do it, Xiao Yan would be surrounded and killed by those people. However, at the moment, it seems that he is too young to look at Xiao Yan. The real strength of this black-robed youth is far better than that of the strong at the semi-imperial level. I'm afraid. If Xiao Yan was at his peak, even the ordinary strong fighting emperor could fight. With this in mind, Rao is a white winner, but he still can't help swallowing a mouthful of saliva in his heart. Such a young strong man fighting the emperor, I'm afraid it's rare to look at the whole Yuanwu continent. This son must either stay in my grandson's house today, or he must be killed here. No matter what, he must not leave Hanshi City alive. In his heart, Sun Shuo's body on the void suddenly shook, and the earthy yellow fighting spirit immediately rushed out of the body surface. With a big hand, the giant sword started again. Sun Shuo's body flashed, and in a twinkling, he appeared in front of Xiao Yan. With a wave of his arm, the giant sword immediately tore through the void and slashed Xiao Yan's head. Seeing this, Xiao Yan couldn't help but be a little surprised. When the look on his face changed, Xiao Yan's body just recovered a little fighting spirit, quickly circulated along the meridians and ran through his whole body. Then, when Sun Shuo's blow was about to fall, Xiao Yan's figure suddenly disappeared in the same place, and Sun Shuo's powerful blow finally split into the void of no one. What? This boy, what an amazing speed. Is this the power of Tianjue Bu? If I can get Tianjue Bu, Seeing Xiao Yan's terrible speed, Sun Shuo was surprised at first, but then a different thought came out at the bottom of his heart. Invisible, the corners of his mouth couldn't help showing a smile full of greed. Tianjuebu is the main reason why the 4 main sects chase Xiao Yan. Its strength is not hard to imagine. Moreover, Xiao Yan at the moment makes Sun Shuo see the strangeness of Tianjuebu with his own eyes. In the face of such treasures, it is naturally impossible to say that Sun Shuo is not moved. At the thought of all the benefits of Tianjueben, Sun Shuo's heart can't help but become hot. Now Xiao Yan is only a 6-star and a half emperor. After practicing Tianjueben, he can break out such a terrible speed. If he gets Tianjueben, as long as he practices hard, once he reaches great success, isn't it that even the patriarch of the 4 major gates can't help him? At that time, his Sun family will naturally become the 5th largest force in the western region except the 4 major sect. At that time, why should the Sun family take Tianjian Gate as a shelter? Instead of living under the eaves of others, they might as well form their own school. Anyway, Tianjian Gate often says that his Sun family has no ambition. In that case, the Sun family will do something ambitious so that Tianjian Gate can know whether his Sun family has any so-called ambition. With a sneer in his heart, Sun Shuo's body, which had just stopped, rushed forward again. His body was like a flash of lightning. He rushed away at a high speed to Xiao Yan, who was hundreds of feet away. The right wrist holding the handle of the giant sword turned slightly, and the sword edge was upward. With the momentum of breaking bamboo, it tore open the void on both sides and reduced some resistance. Sun Shuo's body rushed forward quickly. In a twinkling of an eye, he had come to Xiao Yan again. Seeing this, Xiao Yan's face changed again. Although he was sure that he could deal with any semi-imperial strongman under Do Di, It was impossible for Xiao Yang to deal with him in the face of the real Do Di strongman, especially a 3-star Do Di with a high level. This point, let alone in Xiao Yang's current state, even in his heyday, Xiao Yang was equally unsure. The pace of his feet changed, and Tianjua step was performed again. When Xiao Yang's body just disappeared, the giant sword stabbed him fiercely. Even if he narrowly avoided the blow, his sharp strength but still left a deep scar on Xiao Yang's chest. The corner of his mouth drew slightly. Xiao Yang mobilized the fighting spirit in his body and removed the strong qi flowing into his body along the wound. Then, Sun Shuo's body hit again. The huge sword broke through the air, was arrogant and extremely sharp. Even if he was far away, it still cooled Xiao Yang. Damn it! In his heart, Xiao Yang scolded angrily. Xiao Yang had to take Tianjua step again, constantly avoiding Sun Shuo's attack in the sky. Under the rapid consumption of fighting spirit in the body, Xiao Yang's figure left a nearly solid residual shadow in the sky, and Sun Shuo, with a sneer on his face, followed Xiao Yang like a maggot of tarsal bone. Although he was surprised by Xiao Yang's speed at the beginning, when he faced Xiao Yang at a real speed, the latter was still difficult to match. After all, with Xiao Yang's speed, even if he tried his best, he could only compare with Jin Yao at most. If he wanted to compete with Sun Shuo as a 3-star fighting emperor, that's too contemptuous of the strong fighting emperor. In a short moment, more than 10 wounds, large and small, had appeared on Xiao Yang. On the one hand, Xiao Yang escaped quickly with the help of the power of his soul. On the other hand, it was Sun Shuo who kept his hand. However, at this moment, Sun Shuo seems to have had enough. The sneer on his face gradually disappears. As soon as his wrist rotates, the huge sword in his hand is thrown out. The sharp blade points directly at Xiao Yang. The power of terror makes a harsh sound explosion while tearing the void. At the same time, Sun Shuo's figure also disappears in place. Quack quack. Xiao Yang, I just gave you a chance to escape, but you don't seem to cherish it. Now, get ready to die. Seeing the huge sword, Xiao Yang's face just changed. Between heaven and earth, Sun Shuo's sharp laughter full of yin and ruthless came. Xiao Yang's face was dignified. In the center of his eyebrows, the surging soul power spread out without leaving any force. At the same time, when he grasped his right hand, the Xian heavy ruler appeared in his hand again. As soon as his arm shook, a few fighting qi in his body quickly poured into the giant ruler at the moment. With a puff, the gorgeous strange fire also rose at this moment. At the same time, fighting spirit was also injected into the broken black robe on Xiao Yang's body surface. With the injection of fighting spirit, the broken black robe quickly recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was already a dark black robe. After the infusion of fighting spirit, the dark color seemed to become more profound. However, this scene could not help but attract the slightly stunned eyes of the others. At this moment, Xiao Yang was still taking into account his posture. He would use his little fighting spirit to repair the black robe. This kind of behavior is very stupid in the eyes of others. Even when Sun Shuo saw this, his heart was full of sneers. At the moment, Bai Ying, who lives outside the two men's war circle, can't help but frown slightly. After seeing Xiao Yang's strangeness, he didn't think that Xiao Yang's seemingly stupid behavior would really be so useless. 7. Heavy. Broken. Days. Feet. At the same time, the giant ruler in his hand was waved immediately. One by one, the ruler awns shot out from the front of the giant ruler to meet the storm. In a twinkling of an eye, they turned into a startling ruler awn of nearly 100 feet. But unfortunately, when Xiao Yang tried his best to swing the fourth foot, his stamina was insufficient due to the exhaustion of fighting spirit in his body, which made Xiao Yang's body suddenly soft and shook several times in succession, which was stable in the void. The collapse of fighting spirit makes Xiao Yang's face pale at the moment. His strong body seems to be gradually out of control. However, he still forcibly displays 7 times to break the sky ruler at this moment, which is an amazing load on Xiao Yang. However, if only by this, I'm afraid I can't escape Sun Shu's claws. After all, the 4 feet he waved can only block his weapons. Even Xiao Yang can't find out where Sun Shuo's body is at the moment. Boom. At the moment when Kai Mang and the giant sword collided fiercely, there was a burst of breaking wind near Xiao Yang's ear. At the same time, a dark wind rushed towards Xiao Yang's face, which made the pupil in Xiao Yang's eyes shrink suddenly. Then, a big hand suddenly stretched out from the void without warning and grabbed Xiao Yang's head fiercely. Xiao Yang died. The hoarse sneer was insidious. It was Sun Shuo who did it. If this blow falls, I'm afraid Xiao Yang will die. On the other side, Bai Ying, who had already mobilized his fighting spirit in his body, suddenly narrowed his eyes. He suddenly grasped his hands under his sleeve robe and just wanted to start, but the trace of doubt in his heart made his movements hesitant. Bai Ying's eyes are fixed on Xiao Yang. Virtually, he seems to have an inexplicable confidence in the black-robed youth. Maybe Xiao Yang doesn't need his help. Despite such thoughts in his heart, Bai Ying still doesn't dare to be careless. While staring at Xiao Yang, the fighting spirit in his body is always ready to explode. As long as he wants, Bai Ying can still save Sun Shuo before he kills Xiao Yang. Although the price may be huge, he pays all the price to achieve some goals. He believes this is also proportional. Hiss. However, at the moment when Sun Shuo hit Xiao Yang and fell, behind Xiao Yang, a black-painted tent suddenly condensed. Xiao Yang's face was cold and stern. He waved a foot hard at Sun Shuo's face. At the same time, his body also lay down backward. Bang! With a bang, the look on everyone's faces solidified again between heaven and earth. Xiao Yang's figure had disappeared in the black tent, and before it disappeared, the black giant ruler also smashed on Sun Shuo's face. However, until Xiao Yang and his giant ruler completely disappeared in front of Sun Shuo's falling palm was full of angry bombardment on the emptiness. When the people in heaven and earth looked intently, they saw half of Sun Shuo's face smashed by the heavy ruler. At the moment, it became purple and black, and 2 strands of blood flowed out of his nostrils and corners of his mouth. At the moment, Sun Shuo is extremely embarrassed. The windward signal in the open sky kept rising, and the hot sun gradually became dim. The cloudless blue sky began to become deep and quiet unconsciously, as if before dawn or half dusk. The silent sound still clearly echoed in the minds of the people in Hanshi City. At this moment, all the people in heaven and earth stared at the dark figure on the void with dull eyes, and there was an unbelievable expression on everyone's face. The shock in the heart made this group of people unable to spit out half a word from the beginning to the end, although they opened their mouths. Even some people who wanted to say something, but it was clear that the words that had been brewing were stubbornly blocked in their throat, their lips and teeth trembled for a long time, and they were stunned that they couldn't spit out a word. At this moment, even those strong fighters who stood in the distant void also had a dull look on their faces. Even they did not expect that the black-robed youth in front of them had once again broken their understanding of them. This guy. What was that? Just now. What a strange power, different from fighting spirit and soul power, is that thing. It's the power of the road. Several strong men of Do Di stared at the black robe on Xiao Yang's body surface. Their eyes were full of shock. It was unimaginable that Xiao Yang, whose strength was obviously not up to that of Do Di, had actually controlled the power of the road. This boy is really an extraordinary man. You can't be an enemy. Tut tut, I've already understood the power of the Great Road at the half-emperor level. This Xiao Yang has a bright future. I've only realized the power of the road at the half-emperor level. I'm still confident under the arrest of the 4 main gates. I say there's no one behind him. I'm afraid ghosts don't believe it. After the shock, there were exclamations full of all kinds of meanings. In short, the meaning of the words of the strong fighting emperor was that they would not be the enemy of Xiao Yang, or dare not be the enemy. Above the void, Bai Ying's eyes narrowed and stared at Xiao Yang tightly. He was also extremely shocked. Unexpectedly, Xiao Yang in front of him had mastered the power of the road. Although he didn't know what the power of the road belonged to, it was enough to shock him by Xiao Yang's understanding of the power of the road. Xiao Yang, who are you? First, you have such strange fighting skills, and now you are the power of the road. You are really a person full of secrets, but fortunately, I am not interested in your secrets. Bai Ying's eyes suddenly turned and then fell on Sun Shuo. Seeing the latter's swollen half-face, Bai Ying couldn't help but give a sarcastic sneer. What he didn't expect was that Sun Shuo, who was hard to hurt even him, would be severely beaten in the face on Xiao Yang's hand. Now, his Sun Shuo's face was really lost. Hearing Bai Ying's sneer, Sun Shuo's heart suddenly became angry. The expression on his face had just changed. Then, there was another hissing sound of sucking cold air in his mouth, which once again attracted Bai Ying's sneer and laughter. Bastard! Die! When his heart was angry, Sun Shuo endured the severe pain from his face and spit out a word of resentment. His body suddenly shook, and the viscous fighting spirit-like liquid immediately gushed out of his body. When the fighting spirit churned, the surrounding void could not help but get a violent wave. Roar! Then, with a vague roar from Sun Shuo's mouth, with a wave of his big hand, the suction surged in his palm. On the earth, The huge sword that was blasted down because of the attack just now seemed to be attracted by some kind of attraction. The sword body deeply inserted in the earth trembled violently, and immediately flashed out of the earth. In the twinkling of an eye, it has returned to Sun Shoro's hands. Just about to start, but the next moment, the look in Sun Shoro's eyes was suddenly frozen. Together with his breathing, he couldn't help a slight lag. A pair of sharp eyes opened angrily. In the depths of his eyes, in addition to being shocked, there was an increasingly raging anger. I saw that he had returned to the huge sword in his hand, and there was a gap of 1 or 2 centimeters on the original sharp and straight blade. Sun Shoro's sword is not made of ordinary materials. Ordinary attacks can't cause any damage to it, let alone leave such a big gap. I'm afraid even Bai Ying, who is also the 3-star fighting emperor, can't leave it. In the previous collision, Sun Shoro was quite clear that his giant sword had not been damaged at all. At the moment, since there was a gap in the sword, it was obvious that the gap must have been left in the collision just now. The appearance of the gap on the giant sword makes Sun Shoro's anger explode even more at the moment. Xiao Yang in front of him has really reached the point where he has to kill. No matter what today, he can't let Xiao Yang leave here alive. Ah, die for me. A startling roar came out of his mouth. This time, Sun Shoro completely pressed down the sharp pain from his face. With a wave of his big hand, his right hand held the handle of the huge sword. The wide and strong huge sword swirled in his hands. Sun Shoro stepped on the void fiercely, and the void collapsed under his feet. Sun Shoro disappeared in situ in an instant. At the same time, the look on Xiao Yang's face also changed suddenly. With a wave of a huge ruler in his hand, his body quickly flew back. However, Sun Shoro's speed is faster than Xiao Yang's. At the moment when Xiao Yang has just retreated back, Sun Shoro's body shape has appeared in front of Xiao Yang. At the same time, the wide and strong giant sword fiercely tore the void, and the sharp blade has come to Xiao Yang's neck, just a few inches from Xiao Yang's throat. Suddenly, Xiao Yang's pale face turned white at this moment, and his cold hair suddenly counted. A heart in his chest also beat violently and quickly. He let out a low drink in his heart, which made him wave his huge ruler hard. Dang! When the heavy kai foam crossed the void, it brought a cold wind sound. When the huge sword was about to cross Xiao Yang's throat, it narrowly blew it back. However, even so, the invisible strength also left a shallow blood mark between Xiao Yang's neck. Aware of the slight pain from his throat, Xiao Yang was suddenly surprised, and his body retreated more rapidly. However, Sun Shoro in front of him was like a bone maggot. Dang! The terrible power came. The mysterious heavy ruler in Xiao Yang's hand was forcibly bounced away by the huge sword. Sun Shoro's killing intention surged in his eyes. With a twist of his wrist, the huge sword in his hand pierced the void and stabbed Xiao Yang's throat again. In the face of this blow, Xiao Yang was really unavoidable. At the next moment, Bai Ying, who had been waiting for a long time, finally made a rapid move at this moment. With a fierce wave of his sleeve and robe, the fighting spirit swept through, and the long gun covered by the thunder burst out like a thunder. In the twinkling of an eye, he came between Xiao Yang and Sun Shoro, and the huge sword was shaken back with a blow. Then Bai Ying came to Xiao Yang, turned his back to Sun Shoro, ignored each other, and looked directly at Xiao Yang in front of him. Without too much hesitation, he grabbed the collar on his chest, moved his body, and flew away quickly outside Hanshi City. In a twinkling of an eye, he had disappeared in the sight of everyone in the city at the moment. Later, Sun Shoro smashed the long gun in front of him with a hard blow, turned into a dense fighting spirit, and gradually dissipated. But when his eyes turned, he was frightened to find that Xiao Yang and Bai Ying had disappeared in front of him. White win, white win, white win. The roar of the sky was like thunder. Bai Ying clearly heard Uncle Sun's roar in the distant void. However, he smiled coldly, controlled Xiao Yang with one hand, moved his body, and quickly flew to the south. He knows that he and Xiao Yang are still too close to Hanshi City at the moment. If Sun says that Guy intends to explore, he can definitely find their direction. Now he can get rid of the Sun family only by leaving here first. It's night. There were so many dark clouds at night that the bright moon hanging in the sky was covered by dark clouds. There was no light between heaven and earth. It was like a pure black curtain covering the whole world. There is a cold wind blowing between heaven and earth. Over the dark forest sea, you can clearly hear a sound like sea waves beating on the reef. In the dark night, coupled with the biting wind, if you stand here, everyone must be shivering. Look at this day, there seems to be a storm. Over a forest, an old man who could not see clearly was standing at the top of a huge tree. There were a large number of tree waves surging around him. Strangely, those tree waves would disperse automatically when they reached the range within 10 feet around the old man. After careful observation, even the giant tree at the foot of the old man seems not to be affected by the yin wind around the world. The whole giant tree is motionless, and the whole body is like a sculpture. If it wasn't for the breath of life emitted from it, I'm afraid no one would believe that the tree would be motionless under the cold yin wind. Of course, it's not so much the tree that doesn't move as the old man who can't see clearly. He doesn't move between heaven and earth. Well, the world has been quiet for too long, and the dead trees that should have fallen long ago should indeed fall. Spring and autumn come and go, and the 4 seasons change. Only in this way can the mountain forest continue to operate. The old man whispered something. At the same time, a pair of bright eyes shining in the night looked straight at the distant northwest sky. After a short moment, the old man's eyes brightened slightly, and a smile came from the corners of his mouth in the night. Here we are. He smiled again, but he didn't know that it was dark and couldn't see people. Why did anyone say? Just after 10 breaths, a little purple light suddenly appeared in the dark world. Although the light was not dazzling, it was enough to shine on one side of the world in the dark night sky. Hee, Win, you finally come. Under the mapping of purple light, we can roughly see the facial contour of the elderly. The old man looks quite friendly. There are gullies all over his face. These are the knife marks left by years on his face. The white beard reflected a strange light under the purple light, which made the friendly old man look a little more sinister at the moment. Elder Haoxuan, there was an accident. I'll let you wait. The purple light was getting closer and closer. Only when it was within 100 feet did a middle-aged man's light laughter come. Clan leader, what's the matter? Is it difficult, the old thing of the Sun family? No, I just didn't expect that Sun Shore found a way to fight against me, which made me spend some effort, but I was lucky to see that guy eat flat, haha. The old man frowned, and the slightly solemn voice of words in his mouth had not yet been spit out. The figure who had come in front of him waved his hand gently. While the sound of laughter fell in his mouth, he did not forget to shake the young man in black robe who was held in his hand. Naturally, this person is Bai Ying, who left Hanshi City in the evening, and Xiao Yang is in his hand. If you want to escape from the devil's palm, Xiao Yang naturally has that ability. However, he is also curious about why Bai Ying has repeatedly resisted Sun Shore for him. Therefore, driven by curiosity, Xiao Yang let Bai Ying bring him here. However, knowing what he did at the moment, Xiao Yang felt a huge dangerous breath in his heart, and the source of the breath was the old man who appeared in front of him and Bai Ying at the moment. This person's strength is absolutely above White Win, he exclaimed in his heart. Xiao Yang couldn't help regretting. Unexpectedly, he followed Bai Ying all the way and sent himself to the lion's mouth. Moreover, listening to Bai Ying's call to the old man just now, he seemed to be an elder. If he is an elder in Tianjian Gate, he is not dangerous. Damn, I sent myself into the hands of others. He scolded himself with hatred in his heart. Xiao Yang was helpless. At present, he can only put his last expectation on Guyo. In front of him, the old man can't see his strength with Xiao Yang, let alone fight in his hand. I'm not sure. He was really killed with a slap. Of course, these two people naturally don't know what Xiao Yang thinks at the moment. However, even if they know, I'm afraid they will only turn into a laugh. This is Mr. Xiao Yang. Hearing the banter in Bai Ying's words, the old man couldn't help but look at Xiao Yang, who was closing his eyes and drooping his head, frowned slightly, and said in a slightly polite tone. Seeing that Xiao Yang had no response, Bai Ying couldn't help but be stunned. Immediately, his face changed rapidly. He quickly put Xiao Yang on the void, stretched out his sleeve robe with his big hand, and grabbed Xiao Yang's wrist. At the same time, a soul force poured out quickly and poured into Xiao Yang's body along the palm. At the same time, the look on the old man's face could not help but be slightly stunned, but he didn't know what had happened, so he had to come over curiously. However, at the next moment, Bai Ying's frowning face suddenly changed. The soul force that poured into Xiao Yang's body quickly withdrew. The palm holding Xiao Yang's wrist also suddenly spread out and got up quickly. Bai Ying couldn't stop stepping back for a few steps, and then his heart looked at Xiao Yang in front of him. Aside, the look on the old man's face also changed slightly, and the folds on the old face looked clearer at the moment. What's the matter? Something's wrong with this boy? The old man asked indifferently. At the same time, the dry palm turned into claws. In the palm, a bright and dazzling fighting spirit wanted to spray thin. No, it's not that is wrong, but I forgot. Xiao Yang is in charge of different fire. I was surprised by that thing just now. But now I'm in trouble. Xiao Yang can't go on in such a coma. We can't wait that long. If you and I stay here all the time, other families and Tianjian Gate will be suspicious. What should I do? The boy doesn't wake up and can't bring the Hui nationality. It's hard not to kill him and give it to Tianjian Gate as a gift. The old man frowned, and the expression on his face looked very reluctant. Even if you really kill him, you can't give it to them. Besides, Xiao Yang's identity is special. We can't act rashly without knowing his exact identity. Bai Ying snorted coldly. He didn't seem to catch a cold about the baka behind him. Hearing the speech, even the old man on one side nodded. What should we do now? We can't stay and kill. It's difficult to get both sides together. The old man's face looked particularly gloomy under the purple light, but he didn't know what to do. Therefore, he had to look at Bai Ying again. Seeing this, Bai Ying also frowned. When he wanted to speak, they seemed to be in a coma in front of Xiao Yang, but suddenly coughed violently. Cough, cough. When he opened his eyes, a light flashed from the bottom of Xiao Yang's eyes. On the contrary, Bai Ying and the old man looked at each other and couldn't help but smile. Don't wake up early or late. It happened that Xiao Yang woke up after they said their relationship with Tianjian Gate. Isn't it obvious enough? Xiao Yang, who is in a coma, is pretending. Haha, Mr. Xiao Yang really woke up in time, otherwise, our elders will have to help others. Bai Ying laughs. At the same time, he also breathes a sigh of relief in his heart. He slowly stands up from the void, stares at Xiao Yang with his eyes, and means an inexplicable way in his mouth. Hearing Bai Ying's words, Xiao Yang couldn't help frowning slightly under the purple light. Obviously, Xiao Yang didn't catch a cold for the latter's half-joking words. Under the purple light, the change of look on Xiao Yang's face also reflected in the eyes of the two people in front. In the dark night, Bai Ying looked at the old man and smiled. Soon, he looked back at Xiao Yang. He stood up slowly. Xiao Yang couldn't help shaking his head. His fighting spirit was extremely weak, which made Xiao Yang feel out of spirits for a while. There was a faint pain in his mind. This was caused by being attacked by the fierce wind on the way of flying just now. It has nothing to do with any injury, but it would take a few days to recover. Calm down. Xiao Yang's face was calm in the dark night, and there was no look fluctuation on his face under the purple light. This can't help but make the two people standing in front of Xiao Yang slightly surprised. They can sort out their state of mind in the twinkling of an eye, but this kind of person is not dignified. Haha, Mr. Xiao Yang is really an extraordinary person. He is so determined. I feel inferior. He smiled and arched Xiao Yang. Bai Ying didn't underestimate Xiao Yang because he was a semi-emperor strong man. Bai Ying has no doubt that if he dares to underestimate Xiao Yang in front of him, he is afraid he will pay a great price. For this, it is enough to have Sun Shaw as a lesson. Why are you so polite? Since you brought me to such a remote place, I think it's not just to save me. If there's anything wrong, just say it. The expression on his face did not change at all because of Bai Ying's words. Xiao Yang said faintly. Even if he stood in place with his hands around his chest, he looked at Bai Ying expressionless and stopped talking. Boy, you. Seeing Xiao Yang's appearance of being confident and fearless, the old man standing on Bai Ying's side immediately became gloomy, and a cold hum came out from his nose. The fighting spirit in the old man also ran in an instant. Haoshuan. However, then Bai Ying on one side suddenly whispered. The look on the old man's face changed. Glancing at Bai Ying on the other side, he found that the latter was staring at him with a slightly gloomy face. In his heart, he secretly tilted his mouth. His old eyes narrowed and stared at Xiao Yang. He snorted again. Then, the old man took back his eyes. Since Mr. Xiao Yang doesn't like beating around the bush, I won't talk more nonsense. Bai Ying smiled and arched his hand at Xiao Yang. It was an apology for the old man's behavior just now. At the same time, he also said with a smile. Seeing this, Xiao Yang was non-committal, bent his fingers, shot 2 pills into his mouth, rolled his throat, and swallowed them into his stomach. Feeling the faint warmth emitted from his body, Xiao Yang ignored the 2 people in front of him, but took care of himself and slowly operated the skills in his body. Different fire surged up and began to refine the 2 pills in his body. In this regard, Bai Ying can't help but frown, and on his face, he still keeps a gentle smile. Haha, I saved Mr. Xiao Yang anyway. Didn't you even say a word? Without you, maybe I have left Hanshi City with what I got now, instead of talking nonsense with you here. Bai Ying said faintly, but Xiao Yang was merciless. For these impure guys, Xiao Yang really doesn't want to have anything to do with them. People like to use their brains, always like to shoot others. If they are not careful, Xiao Yang really has a way. Instead of taking precautions, it's better to strangle them in the cradle. Hearing Xiao Yang's words, Bai Ying couldn't help frowning. He thought that if he mentioned the previous thing, Xiao Yang in front of him would give him a good face, but he didn't expect that he should be so rude. The old man on one side heard the speech and gave a cold hum with meaning. This time, Bai Ying was too lazy to stop it. Xiao Yang in front of him didn't seem to get along well. Haha, Mr. Xiao Yang may have some misunderstandings. You just heard that we have no good feelings for Tianjian Gate and our Bai family. We even say that there is hatred between our Bai family and Tianjian Gate. In the end, RAO is with Bai Ying's heart, and his tone can't help setting off a ripple. From here, we can hear that Bai Ying really has a big opinion on Tianjian Gate. So, Xiao Yang is not interested in the relationship between the latter and Tianjian Gate. He just wants to know what purpose Bai Ying brought him here. Of course, up to now, Xiao Yang can guess about the latter's intention. At this point, Bai Ying glanced at the old man beside him, and their eyes touched each other. The latter immediately understood Bai Ying's meaning. Immediately after that, the old man waved his big sleeve, and a magnificent fighting spirit swept out in time. Centered on the void established by the three people, a huge fighting mask was condensed within tens of feet around the three people in this world, surround the three. Under the cloak of this gas mask, any exploration will be isolated, and the voice inside cannot be heard by the outside world. In addition, the gas mask also trapped Xiao Yang. Unless the old man took the initiative to remove the mask, it is absolutely impossible to break out with Xiao Yang's current state. The old man's skill not only isolated the power from the outside but also sealed Xiao Yang's retreat. For this, Bai Ying slightly frowned, but he still chose acquiescence. He was also worried that he worked hard to bring Xiao Yang in front of him here. In case he disappeared here without looking back, wouldn't it be a waste of time, but annoyed the Sun family and added trouble to himself. What does that mean, sir? Xiao Yang's eyes narrowed, the look in his eyes was slightly cold, and his tone was slightly heavy. Mr. Xiao Yang doesn't have to mind. Our move is just for the sake of safety. After all, what I said below, there is also hatred between our Bai family and Tianjian Gate. However, if the Sword Gate is at its zenith today and the time hasn't come, our Bai family also has to be careful. Pick his eye. I have no other intention to bring Mr. Xiao Yang here today. I just want to talk to Mr. Xiao Yang about one thing. The eyebrow was light, Xiao Yang's eyes turned, the index finger of his right hand jumped slightly and bounced on his right shoulder. Immediately, his eyes lifted slightly, and a smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. His tone was not salty. Say, I hope you can invite Mr. Xiao Yang to join my Bai family. I hope to sincerely invite Mr. Xiao Yang to join my Bai family as the head of the Bai family. While the words came out, Bai Ying bowed respectfully to Xiao Yang. Looking at this attitude, he was also very sincere. Seeing this scene, not only Xiao Yang, but also the old man beside him, also showed a look of surprise on his old face. He didn't expect that his clan leader would make such a respectful attitude towards the young man in front of him. At this moment, even the old man who believes in Bai Ying's words is also unable to understand in his heart. Even if you want to invite Xiao Yang to join his Bai family, you don't need to be so respectful. You know, it's hard to imagine that a strong man who fights the emperor should show such a respectful attitude to a mere 6-star-and-a-half emperor. In everyone's eyes, duty strong men are regarded as the strong men who really bully themselves into the top of the pyramid on the Yuanwu continent. This level of strong men is not comparable to any so-called strong men under them. Even the semi-imperialist strong men are vulnerable to the duty strong men after all. Only the semi-imperialist strong men bow to the duty strong men, but I never see the strong fighting emperor bend over the strong half-emperor. This scene in front of us is an insult to the strong fighting emperor. After all, looking at the whole Yuanwu continent, has anyone ever seen that the strong fighting emperor will bow to a mere half-emperor? However, all this, only Bai Ying knew in his heart how terrible the black-robed youth was. Yes, from the perspective of cultivation, Xiao Yang is really only a semi-emperor strong man, but in Bai Ying's eyes, the semi-emperor is just a coat on Xiao Yang's body surface. Under this coat, what people can never see and touch clearly is Xiao Yang's fear. It is estimated that Xiao Yang's all strength, with all his strength, may not be inferior to an ordinary first-class emperor fighting strong man. It is such a terrible person with real strength, but his age is much younger than any ordinary strong man. But just like this, Bai Ying hasn't forgotten. Before that, he has also heard Bai Yi tell him that Xiao Yang in front of him is still a third-class herbalist in addition to his strength and terror. His powerful strength can be called a terrible medicine refining skill. Bai Ying thinks that Xiao Yang in front of him is qualified to make him lower his attitude. He does this not only to win over Xiao Yang in front of him, but also for the sake of the family behind him. Win. In the dark night, the old man frowned and just took a word out of his mouth, but suddenly there was an earth-shaking thunder between heaven and earth. Boom! Xiao Yang raised his head and looked into the dark sky above his head. Lightning and thunder were thundering. The silver lightning rushed out of the black fog that enveloped the whole world like a dragon snake. Just for a moment, it also lit up the whole world. In an instant, the whole world seemed to return to the day from night. The dazzling white light poured over the vast mountain forest. At the moment, the old man staring at Xiao Yang saw a very young face. This boy. He said secretly in his heart that he had never seen such a young half-emperor, but those young half-emperors, who were not the children of the great forces, were alone like Xiao Yang in front of him, but he had never seen before. At this moment, the old man seemed to understand a little, but at the bottom of his heart, he still had doubts. Even so, Xiao Yang in front of him would not let Bai Ying show this attitude to him. Even if his cultivation talent is far better than that of his peers, after all, he has missed the best cultivation period. Now even if he joins the Bai family again, it is still very difficult to make great achievements in cultivation. When the old man looked at Bai Ying again with doubts, the latter also glanced at him quickly. The meaning in his eyes seemed to be persuading him not to say more. At this point, the old man nodded helplessly. At the same time, he stared at Xiao Yang with more doubts. He believed that since Xiao Yang in front of him could make Bai Ying treat him with such a respectful attitude, he must have something extraordinary. As for this, I'm afraid he can only let Bai Ying tell him after the current thing is over. Seeing Bai Ying's respectful gesture in front of him, Xiao Yang couldn't help but pick his eyebrow. He was surprised. At the same time, he didn't expect that Bai Ying in front of him would invite him to join his family. The Bai leader doesn't have to work hard. I will never join any forces. The so-called person who doesn't hit the smiling face with his hand, not to mention Bai Ying's attitude towards himself. Xiao Yang's tone of voice naturally eased a little unconsciously. Hearing Xiao Yang's words, Bai Ying looked a little stunned, but he nodded as expected. Naturally, he knew that the latter would not easily agree to such a hasty invitation. What's more, up to now, Bai Ying has no evidence to show that the Bai family behind him is really secretly opposed to the Tianjian Gate. In this way, Xiao Yang is even more unlikely to agree to join his Bai family casually. Mr. Xiao Yang is really as I expected. He won't easily join the Bai family. Standing up slowly, Bai Ying took a deep breath and couldn't help showing a look of regret on his face. At the same time, the old man on the side also looked fierce, and the fighting spirit in his body suddenly turned. He was wearing a robe without wind and automatic, and he wanted to sweep out of his body. Haoshuan, why are you so impulsive? Bai Ying spoke again and stopped the old man on one side. The latter was helpless and had to take back the momentum he wanted to release. Seeing this, Xiao Yang took a sigh of relief in his heart. The palm he held tightly in the dark slowly loosened. In the depths of his eyes, a wisp of forest white flame light quietly disappeared. If the old man had really started just now, Xiao Yang could only rely on Guyo's strength to kill the two people in front of him. Fortunately, however, Bai Ying's move inadvertently saved them from a disaster of life and death. Mr. Xiao Yang, please don't refuse my invitation. Maybe in the future, Mr. Xiao Yang will change his mind. Of course, if Mr. Xiao Yang really doesn't want to, I won't be difficult, but I still hope that today's matter. At the end of the speech, Bai Ying's tone of voice increased slightly, while Xiao Yang didn't think so, but finally nodded his head to understand. When the latter saw the situation, he laughed and continued. If you and I really can't become relatives, then I still hope that you and I can finally become friends. After all, as one of the 4 major gates, Tianjian Gate is not only your enemy, but also the enemy of my Bai family. Mr. Xiao Yang doesn't have to question this. Nodded, but Xiao Yang felt a little moved in his heart. If Bai Ying told him the truth, it would be a good thing for him. After all, one more friend is better than one more enemy. This video will end here.